What does it mean when a feast promised to 20 souls vanishes into whispers and shadows? The dining room of the old Whitaker estate was a cathedral of anticipation that evening, its long mahogany table adorned with silver candelabras, their flames flickering like nervous heartbeats. Crystal glasses sparkled, reflecting the hopes of the guest friends, family, and strangers brought together by my mother-in-law, Evelyn, for what she called the dinner of a lifetime. Her cryptic invitations, handwritten on parchment, had arrived weeks ago, each sealed with red wax and promising an unforgettable night. Yet, as the clock struck 8, the plates remained empty, the kitchen silent, and Evelyn's soft whisper cut through the room like a blade. The food never arrived. The words hung heavy, and a horrified silence gripped the table, as if the world itself held its breath. I sat at the far end, my husband Daniel to my left, his hand tense under mine. Across from us, the guests exchanged uneasy glances. Mr. Harrow, the retired judge with a perpetually furrowed brow. Mrs. Langley, the town gossip whose earrings jangled with every nervous twitch. And young Clara, barely 19, clutching her napkin like a lifeline. Evelyn stood at the head of the table, her silver hair catching the candlelight, her eyes gleaming with something I couldn't place: amusement, perhaps, or something darker. She had always been an enigma, her warmth laced with a sharpness that kept you on edge. Tonight, though, she seemed almost otherworldly, as if she held the strings to a play none of us knew we were in. The evening had begun with such promise. Evelyn, widowed for a decade, was known for her extravagant gatherings, each more elaborate than the last. Her sprawling estate, nestled in the misty hills of Willow Creek, was a relic of old money, its walls lined with portraits of stern ancestors who seemed to watch our every move. When we arrived, the air buzzed with excitement. Guests mingled in the parlor, sipping champagne and speculating about the menu. Rumors swirled of a renowned chef flown in from Paris, of rare delicacies sourced from distant markets. Evelyn had spared no detail linen napkins embroidered with gold thread, a string quartet playing softly in the corner. But as we were ushered to the dining room, the absence of any cooking aromas raised the first whispers of doubt. Daniel leaned toward me, his voice low. "This isn't like her. Something's wrong." I nodded, my stomach twisting. Evelyn's flair for the dramatic was legendary, but this felt different, calculated, almost cruel. The guests, initially chatty, grew restless as the minutes ticked by. The quartet stopped playing, their bows hovering uncertainly. A waiter, pale and jittery, appeared briefly, only to mutter something about delays and vanish again. By the time Evelyn rose to speak, the room was a pressure cooker of anticipation and unease. Her whisper, "The food never arrived," wasn't just a statement. It was a spark in a room doused with gasoline. Mrs. Langley gasped, her earrings clattering. Mr. Harrow's fork clinked against his plate. Clara's eyes widened, as if she'd seen a ghost. I expected protests, demands for explanation, but the silence that followed was suffocating. Evelyn's gaze swept the table, lingering on each guest as if measuring their souls. Then, with a slow, deliberate smile, she continued, "But perhaps that's for the best. Tonight, we feast on truth." Truth? The words sent a shiver down my spine. Daniel's grip tightened, his knuckles white. I scanned the faces around me, searching for answers, but found only confusion and fear. Then, from the shadows of the doorway, a figure emerged, an unexpected twist that shifted the night's trajectory. It was Thomas, Evelyn's estranged brother, a man we all thought had died years ago in a sailing accident. His face was weathered, his eyes hollow, but his presence was undeniable. Gasps rippled through the room. Mrs. Langley dropped her glass, red wine pooling like blood on the tablecloth. Thomas, alive, stood beside Evelyn, his expression unreadable. "You thought I was gone," he said, his voice rough as gravel. "But some secrets refused to stay buried." He stepped forward, his gaze locking onto Mr. Harrow. "Isn't that right, Judge?" The retired judge paled, his hands trembling. Evelyn's smile widened, and I realized this wasn't a dinner, it was a reckoning. Thomas's return was the crack that split the night open. He began to speak, his words deliberate, each one a stone dropped into still water. He spoke of a scandal decades old, a case Mr. Harrow had presided over, a case that sent an innocent man, Thomas's best friend, to prison for life. Harrow had been bribed, Thomas claimed, by a powerful family to protect their son, the true culprit. The guests sat frozen, their eyes darting between Thomas and Harrow. Evelyn, silent now, watched with the predator's patience. But Thomas wasn't done. He turned to Mrs. Langley, accusing her of spreading lies that sealed his friend's fate, her gossip fanning the flames of public outrage. Then to Clara's father, a banker who'd laundered the bribe money. One by one, he named the guilty, his voice rising with each revelation. The dining room, once a symbol of opulence, felt like a courtroom, and we were all on trial. I looked at Daniel, my heart pounding. Did he know? Was he part of this? His face was a mask, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. I wanted to ask, to demand answers, but Thomas's voice pulled me back. "And you, Evelyn," he said, turning to his sister. "You knew. You let it happen." The room gasped again. This was the true twist. Evelyn, the orchestrator, was not the saintly widow we thought. She had known about the corruption, had profited from it, and now, with Thomas's return, her carefully constructed world was unraveling. Evelyn's composure cracked, just for a moment. "I did what I had to," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "to survive." But Thomas wasn't swayed. He produced a letter, yellowed with age, detailing her complicity. He read it aloud, each word a dagger. The guests were no longer just spectators. They were witnesses to a family's shame, a town's secrets laid bare. As the letter's final words echoed, the silence returned, heavier than before. Clara, the quiet girl, stood suddenly, her voice trembling but clear. "Enough," she said. "This isn't justice. It's revenge." Her words broke the spell. She was no bystander. She was the daughter of the man wrongfully imprisoned, invited tonight without knowing why. Her courage shifted the room's energy, forcing us to confront the cost of vengeance. Was this what Evelyn wanted? To expose the guilty, only to reveal her own guilt? The night ended not with a feast, but with confessions. Harrow admitted his crime, his voice breaking. Mrs. Langley sobbed, begging forgiveness. Evelyn, for the first time, looked small, her grandeur stripped away. Thomas, his mission complete, left without another word, disappearing into the night as mysteriously as he'd appeared. The guests dispersed, some in tears, others in stunned silence, their lives forever altered. Daniel and I drove home in silence, the weight of the night pressing on us. Evelyn's dinner had been no accident. It was a mirror held up to our flaws, our secrets, our humanity. The food never arrived, but the truth did, raw and unpalatable. And as we lay in bed that night, I wondered, what secrets do we still carry, waiting for another whisper to set them free? In the end, the empty plates told a story of their own, not of hunger, but of reckoning, of the courage to face the past, and the fragile hope that truth, however bitter, could set us free.